Hi guys, I'm Mike and this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to another race review guys, and we are joined by a special guest, and that is Mark from Beyond the Grandstand. Thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Pleasure to be on the show again.
Yeah, I know, it seems like it was only Friday since you were last on the channel, Mark.
Oh, can't have been.
Oh, yes it was, beyond the bingo. But yeah, we are here to break down the race that happened yesterday in Suzuka. So, yeah, all we're going to do is just basically talk about some main talking points from the race in detail, and hope you guys enjoy and listen to it. So I suppose the first place really to start off with the race is a massive congratulations to Valterri Bottas. Fantastic drive for him in Suzuka. And yeah, what did you make of his race, Mark?
Amazing racecraft, great first lap. That porridge really helped as always. And it was nice to see the It's James moment happen to his teammate for once, which I think helped secure the win for him.
It certainly did, because I think mentioned it in our race reaction yesterday. I was like, I'm really confused why Hamilton pitted, but the more I've thought after it and the more I think from it, it seems like Mercedes are like, thank you for following team orders in Singapore, it wasn't great, here's this race victory for you, you've been fantastic all weekend. Lewis had gone a longer stint and worked out better, but we're going to make sure that you secure this win.
Now, I could be wrong, but could they have also done it to get Hamilton the fastest lap point? Because at the time, Leclerc was charging through the field, so I'm not sure how the points work out, but if maybe they needed the fastest lap point for one of the Mercedes drivers.
Well,
to just wrap up the constructors then and there.
Well, for me, the fastest lap is only 1 point, and he would have scored more points from finishing in second, wouldn't he? And Vettel finishing in third. Or a 1-2 would have scored the more points.
To hand Bottas the win.
Yeah, it certainly was. But this felt deserved, and I think Valtteri's done a great job all season. This has certainly been, for me, his best season in a Mercedes. He certainly has improved. He's been more competitive in races. His racecraft that you spoke about there has got better. He still struggles compared to the real elite drivers in terms of really getting that overtake when he needs to. But it certainly was a very strong performance out in front.
I still wouldn't say that he's a top team driver. I would definitely say he's a top midfield driver.
Yeah.
He still just doesn't seem to have that edge that I guess you'd used to see from other drivers.
But what makes him a top team driver is his compliance.
He's reliable.
Well, yeah, he's reliable. Well, his reliability has only really come in this season, because last season he was horrendous in terms of instance he was getting in and being off the pace, and they were losing a lot of points in the constructors, probably from what Valtteri did. This year he's been ultra reliable, but I think it's just his compliance in the fact that whatever Mercedes want of him, he will do, because he's grateful to be in that team, and plus the fact that he basically weighs the same as Hamilton, he's the same height as Hamilton, pretty similar driving style to Hamilton, so they can just really focus on one car and then almost like carbon copy it across to Valtteri.
Yeah, he just seems like the perfect, I guess, like balance to Hamilton in the team. Not like just perfectly there. Just doesn't challenge him. They don't need someone to challenge Hamilton. He's already developed. They don't need someone to push him along.
Exactly, and I think it was just like Mercedes over this 6-year dominance have refined their kind of way that they operate to just become more and more efficient. And I think obviously with Nico Rosberg they experimented with a driver who probably, well, yeah, he was better than Bottas because he could challenge for titles, but still not on Hamilton's level really.
Yeah, I think that what Mercedes have discovered is that if you employ one top amazing driver, you don't need two. You just need one who is good enough.
Yeah.
Because if you have two top drivers, they clash. You may lose points, but if you just have an amazing driver and a consistent driver, you'll always score points.
And you can see that just by the way that they've absolutely blitzed the constructors this year. And I think that probably leads us on nicely to wrap up Mercedes from this race in terms of 6 consecutive constructors championships, and it's going to be 6 successive constructor and driver doubles, which is the first time it's happened in history. And whether you like Mercedes, whether you're not, you have to just admire that this is the most relentless, efficient team in Formula 1. They've now surpassed that Ferrari team of the early 2000s, and it's incredible to see what they've done really in this period in F1.
Oh yeah, and I think that the fact that F1 reached such a long Concord agreement with how the cars would stay, that it's helped them.
Yeah.
Having such a consistent 6 seasons of rules is a major factor of what's helped them. There hasn't been a major rule shake-up that has helped another team get on top of them.
Exactly, because obviously Red Bull had that dominance from... You saw them coming in at 2009, and then obviously went 2010 to 2013, winning everything. But then obviously the hybrid engine came in, which they never got on top of. And then obviously with Ferrari, there was a rule change, wasn't there, in 2005 or 6?
I believe there was.
Yeah, I think it was in 2005.
5.
And just Renault managed to get on top of that a bit better.
Now, that brings up the question, should F1...
It was tyres in 2005. They made the compounds harder, and so the Bridgestone tyres struggled, and the Michelin ones, which the Renault were on, didn't struggle, basically.
Yeah. Now, that brings up a question. Should F1 change the rules more often? Instead of 6 years, what we've seen now, should it go back to maybe 3? 3 years in rule change, 3 years rule change.
Well, I think that's already in place for the next set of rules. Because 2021 is obviously the next big jumper change of rules. And then 2024, I believe there's going to be some developments within the rule as well regarding the engine as well. And I think anything that changes the rules in regards to the engine is usually a major rule change.
Yeah.
So they might be going back to that. Yeah. There will always be a team that kind of manages to dominate. Although Williams dominated in constructors in the 90s, a bit like this. I think they won 5 titles in 6 years. I could be...
that sounds about right.
Yeah, but then
You're
obviously...
asking the wrong person about Williams' dominance in the 90s and 2000s.
Very true, we needed Stefano for that.
Yeah.
But in the 90s you had obviously McLaren winning, Benetton winning, Williams winning, and that was just kind of a nice balance and mix up of teams. I think if there was a period of F1 that modern F1 would want ideal in terms of if they were looking forward to the next 10 years, it would be that, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
In terms of winning titles, obviously within that there were some years where the front 2 in those teams were just so far ahead that it wasn't really a title or rival fight.
I mean, I think the main thing that F1 needs to change is the car width, if anything. The engines, I mean, it seems like most of the teams have finally gotten up to a competitive level. Ferrari's now very equal with Mercedes, arguably better in some tracks.
Mm-hmm.
The Renault and Honda are pretty equal.
I'd say the Renault's still ahead. Honda is still lacking behind. And the only reason, obviously, Red Bull stay competitive is because, as always, they have a very good chassis and incredible aero package, which just kind of puts them ahead of everyone else.
Oh yeah, but I think that Red Bull could be in trouble in a few years, because it seems like Newey seems to want to do more and more things out of F1, so how long before he finally says, I'm bored of F1, I want to do something else?
Well, yeah, they're going to have to find another aero guru, aren't they? I think where Newey has lost his enthusiasm probably is with Renault being so unsuccessful, and I think he became frustrated by the Renault and hybrid era, by how much they mucked up. Because obviously within those years they had a pretty good aero package still, and he would have just been so frustrated by, he's like, my car can't be powered by...
Well, is Red Bull still the best aero chassis car on the grid? I mean, after what we've seen in Monaco, for example, and tracks where Red Bull is normally dominant, they're no longer dominant. Is that due to the engine being worse, or other teams have caught up with the chassis, or they've fallen behind?
I think they've probably stagnated on the chassis. I think Mercedes probably have the best one, as an all-round pack. Well, that's not even probably. Mercedes do have the best one as an all-round car because of how good they've been in overall tracks. And Ferrari have the advantage on the engine front, but they've only just realised, I mentioned it in a tweet last night, there's no coincidence that as soon as they've plonked more downforce on that Ferrari that gives the drivers more confidence in the corners, you've seen Sebastian finish first in Singapore, was running in first in Sochi before the mechanical failure, and finished second in Suzuka, obviously, yesterday.
Yeah.
Which probably... So, yeah, we'll go... Massive congratulations to Mercedes. Awesome. There. We should probably get back to the race. So, in terms of the race, we should probably talk about next is Ferrari. And their two drivers both had a bit of controversy, and we should probably start off with the first one, which was Sebastian Vettel jump-starting/not jump-starting the start.
Yeah, it was very interesting, to say the least.
Obviously, we were having a discussion before we came and started recording, and you had kind of found a video that, watching it in slow-mo, that if Vettel had actually carried on going, it actually would have been the perfect start, wouldn't it? Because just reaction-wise, anticipation, the lights would have been out when he crossed.
But that also brings up, because I think that if I have a rule that it will still be called a jump start if the reaction time is under, is it 0.20, is it?
Yeah.
So it would be a very, very close call if he did continue on. But
that's why he stopped, essentially,
if he did continue on, he would have crossed, I guess, what you call the penalty line. I guess that's what the FIA are now calling it, when the lights were out.
Yeah, and I know there was a lot of confusion between these incidents, because it was noted as an acceptable, it was tolerated, it was within an acceptable allowance period for this, compared to Kimi Raikkonen's in Sochi, where he did actually leave the grid box and before he stopped, but that was mainly because Sebastian Vettel was deeper within it. But I think probably looking at that slow-mo video, and because the lights were pretty much out, and obviously Kimi's was far before the lights went out, it was probably looked at going, well, yeah, we're going to let this one go. He hasn't crossed a sensor, and
Yeah.
it was pretty close to lights out anyway. Plus, he did get that. Although both drivers pretty much self-inflicted their own penalties, Vettel's was pretty much a penalty in itself with him stopping at the start.
Yeah. But no, like, I think that the whole acceptable limit has come in because of the Kimi thing, because people were saying Kimi stopped anyway, he cost himself 5 seconds, so why penalise him again? That's just my theory, that the whole acceptable limits come in because of that.
Yeah, and we were also saying, for me, I think that's a really good idea, but they just need to tell people, because if you don't tell people, all they have to go on is what they're watching in front of them, and then they would watch Kimi Raikkonen's and they'd watch Sebastian Vettel's, and they'd go, well, other than obviously the leaving the box and not triggering the sensor thing, which they have given as a kind of explanation for it, it just kind of felt like a carbon copy incident, didn't it?
It did. But then again, we have seen carbon copy incidents go unpunished before in other races this year.
Yeah. So they had a very weird stewarding race, I would say. It was... I felt a lot of the race was spoken about of stewarding decisions rather than the actual on-track action, which for me is always a little bit disappointing, because you prefer it to be just a great driver performance or some great on-track battles.
With stewarding, does this race almost feel like Canada Junior with the whole just questioning the stewards, why do that, why this?
Yeah. It does. Obviously not as extreme because it wasn't for the race lead, essentially. But, well, I suppose it wasn't because, obviously, Vettel didn't carry on going. If he'd carried on going and maintained the lead, then I think, obviously, that would have been more up for debate.
Yeah.
And if he'd gone on to win the race. But Bottas pretty much got ahead at the first and never looked back and drove a fantastic race.
No. Yep. Amazing race. Almost like a resurgent Bottas style race. Just got every corner right. Just looked comfortable the entire race. Yeah,
was fantastic. And like we said, he just looked confident all weekend. Moving on to Vettel's partner in Charles Leclerc, and his race was pretty much over on the first corner in terms of competing seriously within the race. And obviously within the race he had the collision with Max Verstappen, and after initial reaction it was deemed no further action would be made, but then was later reopened in the race and said it would be investigated post-race, and he's received a 10-second penalty for dangerous driving going round on his front wing, which will come to go, but he also for that incident received a 5-second penalty and 2 penalty points on his licence. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
I think it was a load of am I allowed to swear on this show, or is it similar to...
Go for it.
It was a load of bullshit, let's be honest. The first corner incident, you can see that it was almost he understeered into him. I mean, that is a risk drivers take going around the outside. You have to hope that the competitor next to you doesn't oversteer or understeer into you.
Yeah.
Right. Any other race, I think that would have been a racing incident. But it was Suzuka, Japan, Honda's home race. So I think it was said, we better give this penalty. And then the further 10-second penalty for driving with the loose swing. I'm sorry, but unless they showed him a mechanical black and orange flag, that penalty should be removed. A driver does not have to pit just because the team has asked them to. Unless they have been shown a black and orange flag, then they can continue going out.
It would have just made it easier on all distance, because he was probably getting mixed messages from the team. They were like, you've got to come in with this front wing. Then obviously the bit on the front wing fell off and it took out Hamilton's wing mirror, didn't it?
Yeah. But then by the same argument, then shouldn't Hamilton have to pick? Because there's an FIA regulation saying that cars must have 2 mirrors. So surely both Charles and Hamilton would have had to come in and retire.
Well, I'm not sure. Obviously, at one point, Charles Leclerc's loose left wing mirror did fly off quite dangerously again. But did that ever get replaced?
No, and neither did Hamilton's.
So, yeah,
It's a plain and simple. Well, if we were doing it by regulations, Charles should have had to be shown black and orange flag. Otherwise, then he has no obligation to pit unless he has that flag showing.
Yeah.
And if they're being really strict on the rules, then both Hamilton and Charles should have been told to box your races over. You don't have 2 mirrors.
Exactly, and it would have been fantastic for Valtteri in the championship and having a exciting title fight at the end, because Valtteri needs Hamilton to have a DNF to even have the faintest of hopes of overturning at the end of the season.
No, it's very much.
But yeah, it was confusing that. But I was just confused. I thought it was dangerous driving out there, but
they didn't show him the flag, so it's
It was poor on all fronts. Charles Leclerc.
Here's the thing I'm saying. I'm not saying that Charles should have stayed out with that damage.
Oh,
He should have come in.
Yeah, exactly.
He should have come in. But he should not receive a penalty unless the flag was shown.
Exactly.
It's plain and simple. Unless he was shown the flag, it's technically not against regulation.
Well, I think we were saying before, him as a driver technically hasn't done anything wrong. So it should essentially be quite a harsh fine on Ferrari not being able to convince their driver to come in and trust them.
Yeah, but no, I mean, if he was shown a black and orange flag and he stayed out, like I'm saying, he should, throw the book at him.
Exactly. But, it was their fault in not kind of bringing that out. And for me, the last one on this instant is 2 penalty points for the oversteer incident into Verstappen seems uncharacteristically harsh on a first lap incident. Like, it was just extraordinary. So obviously Vettel in Monza for that, which we all agree was incredibly dangerous, and got 3 penalty points for that.
And didn't Stroll only get 1 for rejoining the track and sending Gasly off the way he did?
I believe he got 1 or none. I can't even remember.
Arguing that is less dangerous than what Charles did is insane.
Exactly. I mean, obviously they were more lenient on Lance because of he wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for the Vettel incident. But still, it was. Like I said before, the cynic in me goes, Honda's best chance of getting a good result in the race, taken out on the first lap, forced to retire. After Verstappen's retirement, it was reopened, wasn't it? And then obviously receiving probably the harshest penalty post-race
the most over-the-top
that we've had all year.
Times.
Yeah. Because obviously no one complained about the 10-second stop and go. Was it 10 seconds stop and go for Vettel in Monza?
Wasn't it 15? Or was it?
I think it's 10 seconds. He got the harshest one you could possibly get.
Yeah.
And obviously his race was ruined from there, and obviously the 3 penalty points. And that was completely fair. But yeah, this one was really confused. If they'd given it the 2 penalty points for the dangerous driving, I would argue that there was more of an argument for that. Despite obviously the black and orange flag that we've said, that car was dangerous and putting other drivers at risk.
Yeah.
That was the more dangerous element to it.
No, but on the whole balance, I think Ferrari does have an argument. They can do what they did with Canada and try appeal it. They can say, it can't be deemed dangerous and the car unsafe because he did not show the flag to the driver.
Exactly.
And the whole, I mean, I'd say it's 70-30 with the whole first corner incident. 70%, I guess, racing incident. 30% Charles' fault.
I just think oversteering in a wake.
To racing incident on first lap, things like that.
It wasn't like he deliberately drifted wide. The official kind of thing from the FIA was he should have anticipated a wake oversteering him and then allowed more thing. But this is also the first lap and you're trying to gain positions, and Verstappen is the one who's gone around the outside, and they were more side by side. For me, although it was... actually, we'll round off Ferrari there. We'll say that's good on the Ferrari front. We'll probably move into the midfield now, and the next incident probably talk about, well, I think because there wasn't really much race coverage to say, all we can really pretty much say is Carlos Sainz, another absolute fantastic driver in the McLaren, being by far and above, head and shoulders, the best performer in the midfield all season. The only really times that he's been not scored points is mechanical failures and things that were out of his control, like Hulkenberg in Singapore.
Yeah.
So
he is Mr. Consistent in the midfield.
Yeah, you'd probably argue that one of the top teams.
I mean, I still argue that he deserved that Red Bull seat more than Pierre.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But I think Red Bull is regretting not taking him.
Well, yeah, they are, but that was more a political thing, wasn't it? They didn't want to appear weak because obviously they'd claimed they didn't want to lose Daniel Ricciardo, and they'd gone to Renault, and obviously they'd loaned Carlos Sainz to Renault, so they didn't want it to seem like at that time a rival of them. Obviously, Red Bull were far and above of Renault this year. They didn't want to give a rival that they were losing a better driver and gaining a Renault reject.
Yeah.
I think that is the only thing. It was the wrong place at the wrong time for Carlos Sainz. If he had, say, been on loan at Haas that season,
or McLaren,
yeah, he would have been in that Red Bull seat this year. I'm convinced.
Yeah.
But I think also it might be the confidence that McLaren have given him in terms of straight off the bat, the only time in his career he was handing a 2-year deal, so he didn't have to worry about this year if it didn't necessarily go to plan. And yeah, they just supported him entirely, and he's got a fantastic teammate in Lando Norris in terms of they're both competitive, pushing each other, but they almost have like a brother-sibling relationship, don't they?
Yeah. Well, I guess that moves us on to Lando Norris's race.
Indeed, and he was unfortunately sabotaged by Alexander Albon, and I think we both agree on this. Although I've seen it's a mixed view above things. I've seen a lot of people saying racing incident, but I think we both agree that I expected Albon to get a penalty.
Albon deserved a penalty way more than Charles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Albon actually put himself in a compromised position. I mean, we were discussing it in terms of classic races. Ayrton Senna tried to take Prost on that corner and went too early. Well, yeah, you saw him come from quite far behind there, and obviously took him and Prost out. And for me, Albon was almost a carbon copy of that incident, apart from he didn't come worse off, and yeah, pretty much wrecked Lando's race from there.
The way I look at it is very simple. If he did not hit Lando, he would have probably gone over the sausage curbs and would have had to give the position back to Lando anyway for leaving the track and gaining an advantage.
Yeah, so it just seems... It almost... I thought it was one that certainly was veering more towards penalty than there. But then it made the punishment on Charles so much more confusing, because if both had been racing instants, then you'd just be like, well, this is the FIA's new rule of just let them race and wheel actions what they want. But now that Charles was punished within the race, you go...
Now, I have a theory.
Okay.
Would Albon have got a penalty if Max hadn't received damage and didn't retire?
What, in terms of going to our Honda conspiracy of being frustrated by the fact that their main race winner contender was taken out of the race early?
Yeah, so that's my theory. Would he have received a penalty if Verstappen's race wasn't over?
Arguably, yes, but
yeah.
I think it's more, it would have been still given a racing instant. I think it's more because Charles Leclerc was given a racing instant. I think it is literally, it just seems really weird for me how hard they've thrown the book at Charles.
Yeah,
on the Verstappen instant. And yeah, like you said, with the flags, that's the main point there. But Norris actually himself said he didn't believe it was the Albon incident that affected his race as much. It was actually Charles staying out and had done some damage to...
yeah, he got debris in his brake.
Yeah, which caused them to overheat.
But looking at it seems like, just looking at the replay, it seems like he got lots of the debris either the first or second lap.
Yeah, and he was driving fine.
In which case, it's hard to argue whether Charles pitting would have made that much of a difference.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel very much on all this it was anti-Charles and Ferrari and pro-Honda.
It felt very pro-Honda. I mean, I'm not saying there's a conspiracy, but weren't there 2 or 3 Japanese stewards? Race stewards?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we won't go as far and jump as a conspiracy, but it seemed very unusual in terms of what they had been doing recently.
It seemed very Honda protectorate. Like, just don't penalise Albon, penalise Charles. Yeah, I wasn't overly happy with the stewarding that race.
No. And I think that probably rounds off McLaren nicely, and if we then look probably the only ones to really talk about, I think, would be Renault and Toro Rosso Renault Racing Point and Toro Rosso. And so we'll start off with Renault, and Danny Ric, after having a terrible qualifying, superb on the Sunday as usual.
Arguably driver of the day, in my opinion.
Yeah, for me, driver of the day was Valtteri. I just thought his efficient.
I'm very iffy with giving driver of the day to drivers in the top team who started at the top end of the field and winning. It's like, driver of the day should be someone who's done something pretty amazing, like coming through the field to finish in a high position.
No, I agree, and there are obviously times that, I'd agree with that. But I just thought the way he had all weekend, I thought it was a fantastic weekend from Valtteri, and
no doubt.
And how he'd kind of beaten Hamilton in every session so far. Yeah, obviously assisted by the Mercedes decision to pit Hamilton again, but was still he was faultless from start to finish, really.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Danny Ric and Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez were all up there for me.
Well, Sergio Perez kind of lost my vote on the last lap.
Well, sorry, what last lap?
True. That never happened.
I don't believe...
The race ended lap 52. The lap ended lap 52, I forgot.
Yeah, exactly. Lap 52, someone's pressed the button early. Damn it, it's finished.
Someone's done in Canada 2018.
Bloody hell. Yeah, well, we'll talk about that after talking about Renault Racing Point. I think that'll probably be the one to finish on in terms of just an absolute bamboozlement. But yeah, Danny Rick was just a fantastic drive. He went so deep and so good tyre management on his first stint. I think he was running in fourth at one point, wasn't he? Because he'd gone so deep.
Yes, he was.
And yeah, and then obviously had built up enough of a gap.
Renault got the strategy right for once.
Yeah.
With the moment he got overtaken by the fresher tyre people of Sainz and all that, they pitted him straight away. No.
Exactly, and then he was on softs himself, and yeah, just had a fantastic end to the race, and classified as P6 due to that penalty to Charles Leclerc. So a really fantastic.
I just realised how lucky Perez was with when he did bin it.
Yeah.
Just with just when he binned it, like when it went on the final lap.
I mean,
he binned it literally. I think what was it?
Well, it's turn one.
I think he binned it about maybe 20 seconds after the start of the last lap.
Yeah.
So, just that lucky.
Was indeed, but
it wasn't.
I still think it was a superb drive because obviously he finished, but he started behind Ricciardo, and was able to finish. He was 8th. Was he classified as 8th? No, P9. P9, wasn't he? Because
P9.
he was going to take past Garsley, who was in P8. But obviously, they made contact and he ended up in the wall. But yeah, Hulkenberg within the points are solid, but not a great
Compared
race.
To his teammate, it made you think where he could have been.
Well, yeah, he finished ahead of both. We started ahead of both Ricciardo and Sergio Perez, but in the race managed to finish behind both.
Yeah.
Which. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think it's now like a 7-point gap between him and Ricciardo in the drivers' constructors, which, considering the amount of bad luck that Danny Rick has had, Hulkenberg really should be at least level or ahead of Ricciardo on points.
It's not looking good for Hulkenberg.
No, I think this is just kind of compounding that. Yeah, he's been great. He is a talented driver, because you're not in F1 for 10 years if you're not a talented driver. But his time has come to an end, and there isn't really much more he can offer.
He seems to destroy every good opportunity that lands in his lap.
Yeah.
I mean, Germany was absolutely a rookie mistake that has, in the long run, has actually probably cost Renault P4 in the constructors.
Yeah, because it could have almost... It wouldn't have been P2. Vettel would have got him. But P3...
No, P3 was looking very, very, very likely, and that would have been a nice... Yeah, it's arguably cost him a competitive fight for P4 in the constructors.
Yeah, so...
And I think they know that, Renault. I think they're looking back on incidents like that and other small things that he's done or failed to do, and they're like, we've already got an experienced driver, let's bring in a rookie.
I think they're just, what they're doing is they are prepared. They've seen how well the young talent is doing in other teams, and they're prepared to kind of go, you know what, Hulkenberg's had his time in F1, but it is time for the next generation, and let's see what Ocon can do in the Renault seat, because obviously he was doing very well in that. He was doing as good as expected in that Force India.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be on par with Ricciardo straight away.
No. Well, also he's had a year out of racing, so that does play a part.
But, I mean, Hulkenberg, everyone thought it was going to be a very close competitive fight with Ricciardo, and he's just blown him out of the water.
Yeah.
It's been a shock. I think it's been a shock to nearly everybody. Like, everyone was thinking Hulkenberg's going to keep his record of out qualifying his teammate all the time. I mean, I'm a Ricciardo fan, but to be out qualified by Ricciardo coming into a new team and qualifying, it would make a team question your ability.
Yeah.
Ricciardo's never been known for one lap pace.
No, he's always been known for racecraft on a Sunday, and Ricciardo had so much to adapt to. I mean, obviously he knew what an Renault engine powered car would feel like, but coming from a top team in Red Bull and adjusting to a lower car and getting used to new team environment, how they operate, how they focus. Obviously, yeah, he did retire first race in Australia, didn't he? But not his fault. But yeah, he's just adapted incredibly well to that situation where Hulkenberg has just kind of stagnated. And yeah, it's just been the team are like, shall we go in a fresh direction? Yeah, I think we should.
And I don't think any team's going to pick him up, any F1 team, because his notoriety as the best midfield driver that's not in a top team has been demolished.
Yeah, because now you have Carlos Sainz, who's risen above that, and then you've got Sergio Perez, who realistically for me was always ahead of Nico Hulkenberg.
I'd even say Magnussen looks like a better, more consistent driver than Hulkenberg.
Well, considering he got a points finish in Sochi in that Haas car, there's certainly an argument for it. And the difficulty and complexity it is driving for Haas, because we always have to remember with Haas that it's driving for a team like no other on the grid, really, in terms of...
No,
it's a standalone enigma because of how they buy in all the parts, how they get someone else to develop their chassis. So, yeah, it was no real surprise for them that their Australia spec car was the fastest one, because that's what Dallara had built. And adapting to that with Ferrari parts was always going to be difficult because they don't have a wind tunnel, they don't have anything like that. It's really weird, and they're so heavily reliant on the drivers to get the max they can out of the car.
Yeah. And the thing is, they don't have the resources that they can in America. Like, I don't think there's an American team in IndyCar that would have a wind tunnel, is there?
No.
No, I mean, because I guess if IndyCar was less spec, they could say, okay, we'll do this for you guys if you give us used to your wind tunnel, but there is no open wheel development, open spec series in America.
No, but yeah, so I think it was another race that kind of compounded another nail in the F1 career of Nico Hulkenberg, and that.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more like Grosjean seems to be back in the game. Like, his head is back on, and you can see why Haas would want to keep Grosjean.
Well, like I have always said about him, his qualifying pace and his natural pace in the car is very good, and to get the Haas into Q3 again, I think is a really, really good achievement considering where that car is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that probably rounds off Renault. So we'll just look at out of the Honda performers, Pierre Gasly for me was the best Honda powered performer of the weekend.
I know. That kid should get a Red Bull seat.
But this is where it's confusing. Obviously, me and Ash did before they had their first races together in Spa in their new cars. It's a really confusing thing for Red Bull because Alex Albon will, I think, naturally get the 2020 seat because it's really weird. Albon was in his first season and was struggling to beat Daniel Kvyat. I know Kvyat has had some issues since in the second half of the season. It hasn't quite been smooth sailing, but Gasly has come in And after a couple of races, he now looks so confident in that Toro Rosso, and his last two races have been great.
Could it be the cars are just different?
Well, yeah, no, that's it. It's the driving style. The Toro Rosso suits Pierre Gasly so much more, and the Red Bull suits Alexander Albon more.
Yeah.
And
I think it's a similar thing to the Bottas. Why Bottas is in Mercedes, because Albon has a similar driving style to Verstappen. They don't have to worry about the car being bad for one driver, so they struggle. It's just, oh, great, the car suits both of you, we can score points reliably now.
Exactly, and Albon has just proven that he is competent. He hasn't done anything exceptionally above of what he needs to. He's just been on the money.
Albon is very Bottas-like. I mean, he's good, but he's not wow. Well, he's not a wow kid. He's not a
future world champion for me.
No, he's not. I mean, I still think the future world champions are Norris, Charles, and Verstappen.
I would put Russell in that, but it is hard to kind of compare him because of the car that he's in. But I think
there's got to be something Mercedes know for not giving him a look at a seat. It's almost like they don't think he'll be there.
Oh no, I think he'll be there in 2021.
Should Hamilton retire?
No. I think they'll drop Bottas next year.
Really?
Yeah. I think they will take the Ferrari approach of dropping the reliable point scorer in terms of Bottas being their Kimi Raikkonen-esque, and I think they'll invest in the future, because at some point they're going to have to look to the future, and George Russell is that for them. I think he is very good. It'll be interesting to see how he does, but I think just the way that he goes about things and everything, really impressive. And within the same car, although Kubica was a teammate that should be easy to beat, all things considered, to still do it in the fashion that he's done it is pretty impressive for me.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I think it's just the Williams that's not letting me really see his true potential.
Yeah, for me, it looks a bit more like Alonso at Minardi.
Yeah.
You could see his potential and stuff there, and then when he gets the opportunity in a top team, he will show what he's done.
No, on 2021, everyone's talking about how interesting the top three teams are going to be for the drivers they choose. You know who I'm most interested to see who the drivers they choose in 2021 are?
Who?
Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
Because Raikkonen's going to be out there, either going to keep Gio and get one of the two Ferrari juniors that are looking amazing, either Schumacher or Schwartzman, or they'll get both in, or Vettel will go there and they'll get one of them in. It's just such an interesting possibility of a mix of team that it could be.
For me, Ferrari only own one seat in that Alfa, and I think Gio by that stage would have proven enough to Alfa to have him as the outright one. If this is all assuming that Kimi Raikkonen retires.
Yeah. I think he will. I think he will.
I think he will.
Less and less interested in F1 as days go on.
He does, but then at the end of the day, he also does seem to quite enjoy that. The how this second half of the season has played out, I think, will compound that decision.
But here's the thing: his son loves karting, and by 2021 he'll be at the age where it starts getting really competitive.
Yeah, so he's going to want to be there supporting him, a bit like Jos Verstappen did for Max.
That's my theory of why he's not leaving. That's for why he's leaving. That's going to be the main reason, because his son loves karting apparently.
Yeah.
And he's got a great choice number as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, such a great number his son chooses. Very, very smart kid.
He is a very smart kid indeed.
Yeah.
And yeah, but
yeah,
so the Honda powered engine there will get back from the race, and Racing Point probably the last one. Sergio Perez 17th to P9. Obviously, yeah, we'll lead on to that last lap being ignored in a minute, but Sergio again, for me, rounding off that kind of whole midfield section, it was really frustrating because it looked a really fantastic battle throughout the race, but it wasn't really given any airtime. I think we saw a couple of Ricciardo overtakes throughout the race, and that was pretty much it.
That's the only midfield action we saw, Ricciardo overtakes.
Yeah, and considering that the battle at the top only got interesting at the end when Vettel had to defend from Hamilton, the rest of the race was pretty dull up top.
I also think it's a major thing about teams probably have a say in the camera amount of time and how much sponsors pay. They probably say, okay, we want our car shown this amount of time.
Yeah.
There's money in F1, there's sponsorship in F1, and I think that sometimes dictates camera time.
Yeah, I'd probably be inclined to agree with that. But yeah, Sergio Perez was another fantastic points finish for him, and considering the only retirement now he has is because of Singapore, it's been a really consistent point scoring second half of the season, and it shows Racing Point with that money of Lawrence Stroll are really starting to kind of
find their feet.
Yeah, exactly, and I think they're a real car to watch out for in midfield in 2020.
Yeah,
and I think if Lance can sort out his Saturday qualifying, I think more and more their driver lineup's looking pretty strong as well.
Be careful not to criticise Stroll. Be prepared. Far out. No, English fail. Oh God. Barely any sleep last night. It's all hitting me. Yeah. Just prepare yourself. Don't promote Stroll too much. You remember he's a paid driver, and all paid drivers are bad.
Oh yeah, sorry.
According to the internet.
That's very true.
Yeah,
no, but
all paid drivers bad.
I think for me, Lance, I was very harsh on him come the mid-season review, but overall taking a step back and looking at it, he's had a pretty good first season in Racing Point, and he would have had a very good points finish in Monza, I'm pretty sure, if obviously the Vettel incident hadn't happened. And he's just...
Well, that's another thing, because I'm pretty sure that he'd be a bit... I mean, he's gone from arguably the worst team on the grid to a pretty strong car.
Yeah.
Midfield-wise. And that would shake him up as well.
Yeah.
Because I know that Force India goes for a very different aero style to most teams.
And also, it's a new team, new environment getting used to. Sergio Perez basically runs Racing Point because of...
He saved Racing Point, if we all remember.
Yeah. Well, he saved him. Everyone's kind of pretty much been there for years. And also, Sergio Perez, although he's had stints at other teams, he was there at the beginning. And his longest period has been with Force India / Racing Point. So, yeah, I think he has incredible favour within that team. And so that would be pretty daunting for still 20 years old Lance Stroll. So he's got a lot of time to improve.
I could be wrong about Perez, but doesn't he right now have the longest contract out of any driver on the grid?
I believe so, yeah. He was given 5 years.
Which is insane.
Yeah, but I thought 5 years might make him a bit more complacent, but ever since receiving that contract pre-Spa, he's been superb. So,
well, I'm wondering, with a 5-year contract, there's probably a performance clause in there.
Yeah, has to be.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what he needed to kind of...
There is something stopping him from getting complacent, because maybe his old contract didn't have a performance clause, maybe this new one does, and he's thinking, okay, I've got a good deal here, I'm here for 5 years, I better keep consistent, doing what I'm doing.
Exactly.
instead of thinking, oh yeah, another 2 years, put in it, as long as I do okay enough, I should get another seat. But now he's like, okay, I've got 5 years, but if I stuff up, I'm out of the job, and no team would want someone who's been kicked out for breaking a performance clause.
Exactly. Right. So now, guys, we that probably rounds up Racing Point. So our last incident talking about the race is probably that last lap incident. We can talk between Gasly and Perez that never happened because they ended the race a lap early, which is bizarre.
Yeah. Very.
And the incident itself, for me, I thought Perez was past him, so Gasly needed a back off.
Not completely past him. He still has to give racing room.
Correct.
Looking at it.
So Perez does turn in on Gasly, so therefore
Perez still has to give racing room. His wing was actually still within, like, his wing and front wheels were still, well, on Perez's back wheels. So, by the ruling, Perez actually does have to give racing room.
And that's why it was noted as a racing incident and no further punishment. But I think it made it very easy to make that decision because it didn't
affect the race.
Yeah, it didn't affect the race because the lap was ended a race early. But how interesting would it have been if Hamilton had managed to get past Vettel on the last lap? I mean, Mercedes probably wouldn't have kicked up too much of a fuss. Because obviously they'd already secured constructors.
It ended lap 52.
Yeah.
Not 53.
Yes.
So the result would have stayed the same.
Yeah, exactly. So it would have been very interesting if he'd done that, and say this was a different year and Mercedes and Ferrari were neck and neck in the constructors, and Hamilton had overtaken. That would have been really interesting to see.
It would have been a massive kick up, but it has happened before. Time mistakes have changed results.
Yeah.
I mean, Canada last year. Jeez, what is it with Canada and controversy, actually?
Yeah, Canada is good for that. It's good for having talking points, that's for sure. But yeah, it was just bizarre. But I suppose humans are operating it, and human error happens from time to time. I'm not going to ridicule the guy and say that he should be sacked and thing. In the grand scheme of things, it didn't really affect anything other than Perez got a points finish. Well, it just means that Racing Point got one more point than they would have, because obviously if he retired, Lance Stroll would have come into 10th and got 1 point, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, surely it wouldn't be too much to get someone. I mean, getting the lead car is always easy. Surely it wouldn't be that hard to have someone there with a clicker just counting every time the lead car has crossed the line.
Yeah. I mean, but they also have TVs that are on all the way with how many laps have been.
So it makes you wonder, how can this mistake happen?
It is...
Again, actually. How can this mistake happen again?
Yeah. There should have been something in place after it happened the first time. But for me, it just really rounded off a bizarre race from the off-track team in terms of the Verstappen-Leclerc no penalty to harsh penalty, Albon to Norris no penalty, and then obviously ending the race a lap early, the Vettel jump start and everything. And yeah, it was just bizarre. And like I said, it's not great when talking in a race, you talk about what's happening off the track rather than what's on the track, and I think that's disappointing.
Yeah.
But they shot themselves in the foot, because I think everyone would have been talking about what happened on the track if they showed that midfield battle a bit more.
Oh yeah, it was an amazing midfield battle,
which has been all season, but we haven't really we generally just tend to get like clips on YouTube or Formula One social media during the week, and we're like,
and
why
that
didn't
just
you see
annoys
that?
people more because they're like, why don't you show this during the race?
Exactly. We're like, this is great. What an overtake. But yeah, was very confusing nonetheless. But that probably rounds up our race review of Suzuka. I think you said you enjoyed the race. You said it was your favourite dry race of the season.
Race. But it's definitely very close between Suzuka, Monza, and Great Britain.
Yeah.
But I think just with the midfield how it was, I think that's what was given Suzuka the edge.
I think for me it disappointed because of, I think for it to be a top race, and we've had it, Monza's definitely up there for me because of, you had that fantastic battle between Lewis and Leclerc up top, and then obviously throughout the midfield there was fantastic battles as well. But yeah, for me, I thought it left me a bit. It may be because I was sleep deprived, but it left me a bit like, man, it was a good race, but it wasn't one that I'd go a classic or would make the kind of necessary highlights reel at the end of the season. I'm not
calling it classic. I don't think a dry race has really made the classics this year.
No, but I think it certainly would struggle to make the highlights reel of top races for the season. But that's just me. I think it was good, but that was just because at the top, a fantastic drive by Bottas, but it was basically any of the overtaking in the top 3 came from pit stops. So yeah, but guys, that probably rounds things off. Mark, thank you so much for coming on and stepping in for Ash, because I'll explain afterwards why Ash is not here. But yeah, thank you so much for doing it. And guys, if you haven't checked out Beyond the Grandstand, go and check out their channel, subscribe to it. Great Aussie guys who get there and so knowledgeable about F1, and we just really enjoy getting together whenever we can.
Yeah, we don't take stuff lightly. We're not afraid to start a bit of a controversy.
Exactly. Well, you just say it as you see it, and I think that's all you can do.
It needs to happen more often right now.
Yeah, I think honesty is the best policy, and I think people respect you more if you are honest with that. But yeah, Ashley isn't here because he's currently on a plane to Vegas, and I will be going and joining them out there on Wednesday. So that would mean driver ratings was cancelled yesterday, but this will be a video. There will be a video Fantasy Weekly on Wednesday. Then we have a special 2-parter to our driver rivalry series on Saturday and Sunday, before me and Ash return next week on the Wednesday, and then the Mexico videos and preparing for that will come out on Thursday preview as always. But guys, yeah, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Thanks again to Mark. Comment down below what you thought on the major incidents in the race. If you are new here, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification, and you F1 fans, keep racing.